Welcome to Crawlspace. I'm Tim here today with Lance in the Crawlspace studios in Wormtown. Lance, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. Had a wonderful weekend. How was your weekend?
Oh, it was just peachy, Lance. And for this episode today, we had Naama Kates, the one and only Naama Kates from the show Incel, in here at the Blue Table in the Crawlspace studios in Wormtown, and we had a great chat about her show.
We really did. When she started doing Incel, which stands for involuntary celibate, and you can search that on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it's a great investigative dive into this subculture of people who believe themselves to be involuntary celibate. When she approached us to do this show, I couldn't wait for this moment where we talk to her several episodes in, and we get to hear her journey.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And so this is the second time, actually, she's been in here to speak about the show. So the first time, I think, came out in maybe August. So you can check that out. This is kind of a sequel, I suppose, to that. But we go deeper. You know, it's a much different conversation, and it's more in-depth, and she's at a different point in her journey now than she was then. So it's a completely different conversation.
So enjoy the conversation with Naama, but if you're curious about Incel, what is this Incel thing? Go check out her podcast. Just search Incel on all of the podcast apps.
Yeah, links in the show notes. Check it out. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome back to the Crawlspace Studios. Naama Kates of Incel. How's it going, Naama?
Good. How's it going?
Oh,
Great.
So good.
Good to have you back in the saddle, as they say, or as just one of us.
As the person who wrote that song or something.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
Was that AC/DC?
Aerosmith, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Should have been AC/DC.
I think we
Yeah.
had this conversation before.
I'm not an.
I think I
Aerosmith
might have
guy.
even had this one with you guys before.
We have a limited amount of material.
Right.
Yeah.
All the hits.
It's like a record.
All the hits.
Speaking of hits, Naama, you produce the podcast Incel, which is a bona fide hit. And in the true crime, well, it's more like society and culture, right?
Yeah.
Is that what category it's in?
I think it like the interest in it would cross over, certainly.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're not criminals that I speak to.
Right.
Right. So if you look at our website, crawlspace-media.com, you see the Incel logo. Don't think that we're talking about people who are criminals, because I could see where there'd be a little bit of confusion, and we should obviously clarify this, that we're not talking about criminals here, because we do a lot of true crime. That's primarily what we do, and Incel was a bit of a step away from the true crime. It does have some elements of, what potential violence could happen due to this. Do you call it a condition? How do you define what's going on there?
Well, a lot of people call it a cultural movement or phenomenon, but the incels themselves don't think of it that way. So they call it like a life situation. I would call it like a self-identification, I guess.
Identify.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the goal, though, is to ascend, right?
Yeah.
For most people?
Yes, pretty much all.
Okay, what do you mean by ascend? Ascend to another level of godliness?
Of existence, even.
Yeah.
So, other statuses, like normie tier status, or for men, it's chads. So
the goal of being an incel is to not be an incel any longer.
Yes, I would say so.
It's so interesting to me.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think we got to back it up a little bit. How do you even come to recognize and define yourself as an incel, and what exactly are we talking about? I know we've listened, and I know that there are people who have listened, but for those who haven't listened and don't know what we're talking about,
what are you waiting for?
What are you waiting for? I got a DM from someone who listens to the shows, and she said, "What's the podcast? I think it's about Excels and
Excel spreadsheets."
Excel spreadsheets. Well, surprise! It's not about Excel spreadsheets.
No.
That would be fascinating.
But I think
timely podcast.
I think there needs to be a little definition.
So, okay, incel stands for involuntary celibate. That should be pretty self-explanatory, but if it's not, it's, people who are involuntarily celibate. They are celibate for reasons they don't choose.
So these are people who want to be in a relationship and have not been able to find themselves in a relationship.
Right, basically. A relationship or just even a
Yeah.
I think this is where some confusion comes up, because you said that they're involuntarily celibate, and you said that they choose to not be in a relationship.
No, they want to be in a relationship.
They want to be in a relationship.
Yeah.
And they're involuntarily celibate.
Yeah.
So they
can't succeed in
their
forming
conclusion
a connection.
that they are involuntarily
unable to be
Yeah.
in a loving relationship.
Right.
It's not their decision.
Yes. Some of them wouldn't say loving relationship, though most of them, acknowledge that that is what they want. Indeed, some of them just think of it purely as being sexually successful or something. So it's not, some of them don't seem very sensitive when they talk about relationships, and that might be the type of thing people see a lot online on the forums, as if they just want, sex, and they just want to be able to get laid, and they objectify women. But most of them, no, they want a loving relationship.
Do they think that they're born this way?
Yeah.
So it kind of reminds me of, the certain religions that will insist that you are not born homosexual.
That you're not born.
Right, that it's not something, that it's something that you want to do. So how do you get past defending that this is something that they don't want to be a part of, and they want to have a relationship?
Well, I know that they don't want to be a part of it. They definitely don't. They are depressed as a result. They feel like their life lacks purpose, and I can understand that. As I've said many times, a lot of people kind of respond to them with, well, there's more to life than just sex. But if you're a young person, and obviously romance and relationships are a very big part of life, and if you can't make those connections, I could see that being very present on your consciousness, which it is. They definitely want to be in relationships. They feel sort of rejected and unseen by people in general.
Are they all men?
Yeah, the ones that I talk to are all men, though I'm probably going to have a conversation with a femcel soon.
Oh, wow.
That's a female incel. And most of the incels don't think that females can be incel.
Now, are they all virgins, or all of them?
Pretty much all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, does a couple of, like, say, a one-night stand or something like that, does that, like, if they had that, does that preclude them from being an incel?
I mean, it doesn't. The definition, like, according to the forum, and again, these definitions change.
Yeah.
They're a little bit flexible. But according to the forum that I deal with mostly, which is their main forum now, especially now that the subreddits were banned, it used to have, like, sort of an arbitrary time limit. Like, if you've been involuntarily celibate for 6 months or so, then, you fit the criteria. There's one that I spoke to that had a girlfriend prior to his being involved with the community, but the vast majority of them, they do these internal polls. Again, I love to speak about the polls because I think they're really great. And something, like 90%, well, let's see, that there was a higher percentage, maybe 20% or so, that had like previous sexual experiences, but a lot of those were escort cells. So,
Okay.
Everything's a cell.
I know. Two things to unpack.
Right.
Why? I have a feeling what the reason is, but why no women? Why do they believe that this isn't something that can be attributed to a woman?
So they believe that it's because females are the ones that are sexually selective between men and women. And that's also why, because I've gotten asked this before too, why they don't have any gay or homosexual members, because they feel that it's women that are the ones that are, that have these unreasonable standards, as they would assert. And so heterosexual men are the ones that get left out and can become incel.
Okay, so what are the levels?
Levels of what?
Well, we had talked about they're trying to achieve a higher level of existence.
Okay.
What are the stages?
Basically, they're just, they say the top 20% of men are chads, right? So these are the top 20, and they love the Pareto distribution rule, sort of a economic and statistics rule of the way things are distributed, where the top 20% of, you can apply Pareto to pretty much everything, and it does, hold, gets like the majority of the, the top 20% of men get 80% of the attention from women, and they look at like Tinder studies and see that this is kind of confirmed.
So because you're in that top 20% of looks, you're predispositioned to have a better chance with women.
Right. And
business that even extends to?
It does, yeah. And that they acknowledge that it's not just looks, but they think looks is the highest, is the most important.
Okay.
And so that's the top 20%, and then the bottom 20% are incels, and in between is just normies.
There's like a cross-reference of male society.
Mm-hmm, yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
So incels, normies,
and chads.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I agree on a certain level that there's I guess, categories with the human race, and that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, and like you said, with economics or with work, with professional life too, you can kind of apply this,
Yeah, I mean, there's something to that. Some of it, you can't put your finger on a lot of it. But
right.
Like a lot of the quarterbacks in the NFL, just using a real rough example, a lot of the quarterbacks in the NFL are very handsome guys, like tall men.
Yeah, right.
But there's something about that leading other men too, though, that actually does work, I think, in that instance a little bit. But
yeah.
That might be why that works in that instance. But
do they look at the upbringing and the societal effects, to use a Tim Pilleri coined term?
I'm the only one who's ever said that.
Well, that's why you coined it.
Oh, it's societal effects?
Yeah.
Oh, I say that on almost every episode. Should pay you.
So do they look at these chads and they say, well, look at where he came from. Look at his family. Look at the environment that he was raised in, the college he went to. Do they take that into consideration?
They, not so much. They do a little bit, but they think that generally in society we value some of those things, and that it's much more about like how you're born with these certain characteristics. So they don't look at, I mean, they certainly look at society's I can go back to those dating apps again, but like societal effects is contributing to this issue, but they think that it's a lot more just about what you were born with.
Okay. And do you agree with that assessment of it?
No, I think that that yes, the role of looks is probably downplayed societally because we don't want to acknowledge that people are, not just looks, but like other traits that you're born with. We don't want to acknowledge those things as much, and we like to say, because it sounds good, that like everyone can have the same opportunities if they only X, Y, and Z. But I don't think it's black and white.
Right. We're talking about the human race.
Mm-hmm.
They can't be black and white.
No,
yeah.
Right.
And but they approach it as sort of black and white.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
But isn't that also because like a lot of these fellas people have never really met too? Like there's kind of no way to size somebody up, another person, because a lot of times they're just communicating through message boards.
Completely, yeah. And I find that is also contributing to this situation, that a lot of people are not meeting as much in person, so they use dating apps and things like that, and that leads to the same thing, to people being kind of written out of the equation before anyone can give them a chance.
Is there any theory that these are repressed individuals sexually, whether they're repressed homosexuals or maybe they were brought up in an environment that taught them to be shameful of sex?
It's a personal theory that I believe to a degree.
Right.
Sure.
Again, nothing's black and white. There's probably a few in there.
Yeah. But that's never been considered or addressed like on a broad scale. I know that there are a couple students right now who are working on things like that. I would say that that's probably a little bit over, that the influence of that might be a little bit over emphasized too. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of these guys are young, and this might be like a passing thing for a lot of them. But, they're not, I don't know. It's a complicated question.
How young are they?
The average age of the groups is in the early 20s, and there's a lot of even late teens and stuff in there.
And have you seen a lot of people come and go? Have you seen them ascend?
Not really, but I've seen a few, and if they do ascend, then a lot of them can't stay in the group, so you wouldn't really hear about it.
I see. So, okay, so the goal is to leave the group essentially. But doesn't it seem like it's like a group of people who are kind of commiserating together, and they're there for each other. They are seemingly some of the only people who understand what each other is going through. So to
It's
completely
an echo chamber.
Yeah, but to completely abandon the community afterwards, that's kind of seems weird to me. I'm just saying, throwing it out there. Maybe they have problem with leaving the
Yes.
group that they know so well.
Yes, that's a huge problem.
It's a huge paradox, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You're only communicating within your own group
Yeah.
about this thing that's uniquely yours as the group.
Yes.
But the goal is to leave the group.
Exactly.
And then once you leave the group, you're not allowed to come back
You're not
in.
allowed to come back in. And how are you going to deal with all these new things if you've been
Right.
identifying this way, and if you've only gotten really support and validation from this community, and then all of a sudden you have a life-changing experience, and it's a lot of new experiences, and you don't have your friends and anyone to talk about it with. You know,
It's like getting released from prison.
Yep.
Like you want to get released
It's
from
a lot
prison,
like
and then
that.
you have to figure out how to behave in society that is
Yeah.
not a prison.
Exactly.
Interesting. What's the difference between ascending and leaving? And have you ever just asked them, why don't you simply say, I'm not an incel?
It's the same thing. I mean,
Okay.
that's just a term for it, ascending. But if you say I'm not an incel because you've ascended or whatever, then technically that's what you're doing. And if you go into the forums and you talk to anyone about having had a girlfriend or anything like that, then you would be banned.
At any time, if you were in the forum and you said something like, in 5th grade, I had, my first kiss with a girl was in 5th grade, that would be...
No.
Okay.
Just if it's seen as a brag.
Oh.
Right. Okay.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
wouldn't that be helpful information? Like we're just saying, like this is kind of an echo chamber. And I know that they talk about that. I think it's a book, The Pickup Artist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like a guy picking up women is something that they do admire. Would they be open to hearing from someone like that? It sounds like no.
Well, there's 2 reasons for this, and I pressed them about this too, because I'm like, wouldn't you want to hear from formers? Like,
Right.
wouldn't that be someone that would be valuable to hear? And they say that the benefits of keeping the group closed outweigh the benefits of hearing from normies to an extent. The reason they keep the group closed, and I completely respect this, is they don't want people making fun of them. I mean, they are treated very badly, and I get wanting to have a space for yourself and feeling accepted there. But yeah, that's definitely an issue.
You mentioned they're treated badly out there. I see some of that rhetoric online too. Just sometimes even when you just like tweet out a link to the episode. So how does that make you feel? And what do you make of that rhetoric?
I've gotten really used to it, so I just expect it now. It doesn't really bother me that much anymore. But it really bothers me that people do that, and I think it's really not helpful.
Do you think that the people who do that aren't listening?
They're not. I know that. I mean,
Not only not listening to your episode or episodes.
they're not listening.
They're not listening.
Period.
Period. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I've had people comment about some of my episodes, making comments about things that weren't even said, because they just automatically associate this definition with certain other things that they find objectionable and they don't like. And that's it. I mean,
That's
there's
interesting.
Yeah.
The definition of incel creates an association in their brain that they didn't like. That's not the same definition. So
Yeah.
if they don't like homosexuals, and then they hear incel, it's sort of the same thing for them.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say specifically the association that it creates, and this is partly due because the media has drawn this link, is with racist, white male supremacists, bigots and things like that. And I just find it ironic because the people that are acting that way are being, you could argue, bigoted themselves. And
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you Google incel for a definition, one of the top things that comes up is incel versus alt-right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good.
Why
okay.
is that? Why is that a thing?
Because it's been well, I mean, it's not that there's no truth to it, but that's been sort of the narrative that the media has been writing about incels pretty much continuously and explicitly since 2014 with Elliot Rodger, that alt-right and incel are in the same, there's an overlap. They do overlap because it's young men, because they are they do tend to be a little bit more conservative or traditional, I would say, in a lot of ways politically. And I have a lot of theories about that and why that is, that are interesting, and they're not, black and white either. But, and also sort of the shocking speech in the climate now, where everything that you say that is, it's just, I don't know.
No, that was good, because you're talking about a group that I guess can resemble a group like neo-Nazis or something like that. Like they could, I mean, just in someone's head without...
In someone's head for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're trying to link that in the media.
Yes. And it resembles those groups for other reasons too. It's actually very similar. I would define those groups as political or social protest movements, and incels can be that too, or cultural protests. Like there's some gripe or grievance they have with society, and they form a movement to address it. This happened a lot in the 20th century, the middle of the 20th century in Europe, and that's where we got fascists and communists out of, when young sort of misguided or just disillusioned and dispossessed people get involved with political movements that aren't necessarily educated in them. Then you get results that aren't great a lot of the time, and so there are circumstances that resemble those groups, but they're not. The end goals, the ideologies, and the beliefs are very different.
Okay. And, well, you also mentioned a name there when we were talking about the media. Who is this person?
A name when?
Elliot Rodger.
Oh, okay. That's the shooter, the Isla Vista, California shooter.
We've had so many shooters.
We do.
I'm not sure which one this guy is. Okay,
so this one was in 2014. He's the first one that is definitively linked with this movement. He left a manifesto that was 150 pages and published it the day that he committed the attack, as well as some videos. And the manifesto was well written, I would say, and his videos were kind of compelling. So he makes kind of a charismatic leader identity that people have fused themselves with since.
And his name comes up a lot on the forums. They even use his name sort of as a verb, right?
Yeah, to go ER,
right.
To go Elliot Rodgers, to, commit a shooting like that.
Right. So is he praised in that community?
No, I would say for the most part he is condemned, and his acts are condemned, but sometimes they praise him in ways that I understand, kind of just saying that they relate to what he did, or they admire the bravery or whatever. Mostly they do it to be shocking or, controversial, to shitpost.
Right, to joke in a way.
To joke, yeah, and to just get attention.
Okay.
Do you think that you would need to dig a little deeper and get into an underground part of the incels? Yeah, undercell.
Oh.
In order to find out who is not just bragging about this, about going ER?
Well, so there are offshoots of the forums that exist outside of them, that are more edgy or more controversial. You might. I think that I would like to work with them in a way to have, the moderators and stuff of this forum, if they can identify people like that, to possibly send them over to some resources or something. But yeah, I found that the ones that have actually committed these shootings have not been active in these communities.
So what are those warning signs, though?
The warning signs is, that's something that a lot of people are looking at. It's really hard to predict these things, but all of the ones that have done it have had, certain diagnoses that I'm not going to say specifically because it bothers people, and I understand why. But there have been a few combinations of, certain mental health conditions in common that are typical to it. But also, and they also have histories. A lot of them have documented histories with school counselors and things of, talking about like violent ideation and wanting to do these things. And there's leakage. We call that like a leakage. Usually sometime before an incident, things come out, but they don't come out to like strangers. Usually they come out to like family and friends.
Are they overall dangerous? Do you get the sense that most of these people are dangerous or angry?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. Not angry?
Angry a little bit, but not dangerous.
Have you ever met anyone who identifies as incel in person?
Yes, but sort of separately to the research of the show.
So not on the show. It wasn't for the show.
No.
Did they tell you afterwards that they were incel? Or they told you before, or?
It was before the show was out, so they told me before, but they didn't know I was doing a show.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
You had an episode, I think it was called True Believer, about Alex, am I pronouncing it right, Manassian?
Alec Manassian, yeah.
So tell us about him.
Okay, so he is, his trial is pending. It's in January 2020, I think. He committed his act in 2018. I think it was April 2018, and it was a vehicle ramming attack in Toronto. So he just rented a truck and drove it into a public street and took down 10 people. He is one that is a true believer, definitely. And his transcripts of his interrogation were just, there was a publication ban on it that was just lifted a few weeks ago. So that was, interesting.
So the transcript is out there.
And some video, yeah.
Yeah. And so I saw you on a video out of Canada, and it had the headline, "This van attacker is trying to trigger uprising in incels."
Yeah.
Is that a little much? He wasn't trying to trigger an uprising?
He believed in uprising, but he was very much in his own world.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you mean by he really believed that, like he was a true believer? What do you?
Yeah, so Elliot Rodger wrote about, and another guy that he referenced, Chris Harper Mercer, they both wrote about beta uprisings or incel uprisings, and that someday, the normies would learn whatever, that incels were actually important, and so just terrorist acts, basically. And I think that Alec Manassian, I get the strong impression that he actually very much fused his identity with Elliot Rodger and believed that, he was living in kind of like a virtual reality. Like it was not, even the way he spoke about the people that he killed and saying that they were separated from their existences, just strange kind of video game terminology. Like he saw this all as like a reboot, I think, for his own life, and I don't think he thought far past that. But I think that he was pretty possessed with the belief that doing this would somehow, change his own life.
Was he on the forums?
He probably had seen some of the forums because he was so involved. I mean, he was just so taken with the terminology and stuff. But his claims about his origin story are bullshit. I don't believe them.
What does he claim?
That he spoke to Elliot Rodger and Chris Harper Mercer individually, and they shared plans about their own, attacks and things they were going to do, which it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add up. He provided usernames and where he met them and when he met them, and those don't line up.
So if Alec believed that he was a true believer, like he was destined for this, how do you speak about him not wanting to instigate an uprising?
You mean if just by speaking about him, does that glorify him to possibly?
That and I mean, if he is living this like alternative virtual reality, how is that not him trying to influence others?
Oh, I think he was trying to influence others, but I don't think he thought it through much. I think it was like a religion to him, and I think that he really didn't think realistically about the consequences. Or it's not like an organized, like a terrorist organization where they organize, they work together, they carry out plans, and they think pretty specifically about what kind of consequences those plans might have. These guys are working alone, and they're not really thinking about, well, will this shooting actually, how will it lead to this change in society? It just will, yeah.
So he was kind of delusional in expecting a certain reaction.
Yeah, if he was even thinking about what that reaction would be, I think he wanted it for himself. He wanted, to be like a martyr for the cause, and he was hoping to get shot too. He wanted a, suicide by cop. He tried. He was yelling out to one of the cops that arrived on the scene, like, I have a gun and stuff, and the cop just didn't buy it, so he didn't shoot him. But I think he wasn't thinking he'd live through this.
Well, that's interesting. And I guess in a really unique way, it is important for your work on this to have someone still alive who's done this.
Yep.
Because typically you hear of these, and this is Toronto, so I mean, they obviously knew how to handle somebody like that.
Yeah,
and they figured it out not to shoot him.
Yeah.
And now he can be useful in other ways.
For sure, yeah.
Okay. So I feel like and stop me if I'm incorrect, but I feel like one of the main questions you were trying to answer with your show was, does this group radicalize people and to become violent? What are your findings on that after having 12 or so episodes out there?
I don't think it radicalizes people. I don't think it, well, at least in the sense that most people use that word. There's really interesting work, like a study specifically done by someone named Kenneth Reedy, that's about benevolent radicalization and how people with some of the same motivators and sort of circumstances, that some of them go the criminal route. They looked specifically at people in London, comparing ones who went to fight for ISIS, I believe, to people that had similar backgrounds and similar concerns that went on to do things that were pro-social but came from a similar place, like journalism or being like a first responder or, something with caring for the community. But it came from like some similar grievances. So maybe it radicalizes people if we're going to make that term neutral. But radicalizes to violent extremism, no, I don't think that it does.
Do you think that there's a lot of ego that goes into that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
There are a lot of people in these kinds of movements that are looking for meaning and purpose and some kind of a recognition.
And there are a number of causes that you could champion and do a show on because you're very thorough with your work. Why did you choose this? I'm sure you get that question all the time.
Yeah, I do, and I don't have a great answer for it. It's just something that was very interesting to me. And now I'm kind of seeing more as I go along why it just like checks a lot of boxes of interest for me, but I don't know specifically.
So it
still.
chose you.
Yes, it did.
I think it's amazing because when we talk about your show, we say it's about the incels, but it's partially about your journey in their world.
Yeah.
Which is really, really fascinating because you said you didn't really know why you decided to take on this cause, but you're checking off these boxes. I'm sure you didn't even know that you had this, like certain boxes that needed to be checked off.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
And have you had any, I guess, I don't want to be insulting by saying success stories, but have you had anybody that you've worked with in this that has ascended?
Yes, actually. Yeah. I'm not going to say too much about them but I've had one that's ascended and one that has just gone to probably just I don't know, become well, I'm not going to say too much about that, but yes, and I'd like to maybe see more or just that find meaning and purpose,
What about sort of the opposite of ascension and someone you were concerned about as far as a violent reaction out in the world?
I haven't had that happen.
But there were some things you were concerned about.
Yeah. There are a few individuals that I speak to that are occasionally saying concerning things. The one that you're probably referring to is the one that I brought up in my episode, number 9, I think it was, where I talked about one that sent me screenshots from a shooting range and talked about wanting to commit a shooting. I am not really concerned about that person anymore. The other is one that isn't really like involved with the group so much, that I'm just concerned about because as a person, I feel like they're very loner type. They have a lot of anger and unregulated hostility that they send at me and, various other people. Whereas most of the incels that I speak to, they don't at all.
So they've been pretty open with you, like welcoming?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. And what was the initial feeling that you had when you received these pictures of them on a shooting range, and they said that they were considering doing something like this? Did you feel a sense of urgency?
Yeah, I did. When I got that, I mean, it was still pretty. I still felt that I didn't really believe that with this person for a few reasons, but one of the first things I did was take the image and see if it came from a website or anything, and it didn't. There was no geo IP stuff on it, and I believe that it was probably real. They probably did go to a shooting range that day, but yeah, I reached out to Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh as well as some other people.
Great, of LA Not So Confidential podcast. Yep.
To ask them, if they had any tips as to how to speak with people.
They helped out.
Yeah, they did. They were really helpful. I also spoke to an FBI agent who was in charge of a big shooting incident, and asked his advice on it and some other people's.
And you've given speeches too on sort of risk assessment. Is that what?
The ones that I've given lectures about radicalization, just about this group, and people don't know much about them.
Yeah.
I find the people that ask me to give lectures or something tend to be more open-minded than most.
It seems like a lot of the things in the media that you mentioned before typically paint incels as being a problem.
Yeah.
And really, I'm just on the side Googling stuff and binging stuff, and it's literally a Vox article that says our incel problem. I
took that article apart in one of my episodes.
Yes, I want you to talk about that.
Okay, so that's Eric Beauchamp, is that right? Zach Beauchamp, yeah. So this article was written in 2018 after Alec Manassian, and like a lot of outlets, it takes a particular posture about incels. He tries to make sort of the thesis of his article that it's not just mass shootings we should be concerned about, but how they can be dangerous in other ways or violent in other ways to society at large. And so I'm reading this, and I mean, there's a lot of faulty information through it. It's a well-written article, but there's a lot of stuff in it that's problematic. And then I'm kind of waiting to get to the point of in what ways are they dangerous? And the things he cites is really flimsy, obviously joking. It just posts from, in my opinion, obviously joking, in his not obviously joking, but not possible to substantiate, about committing rapes and, sexual assaults in public and just stuff that's ridiculous, really. I mean, not to say that those things aren't problems if they happen, but the way that it's talked about, I just find it really implausible. People saying that they commit 100 sexual assaults on the train every day and just things that are ridiculous sounding,
Yeah, and the article goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Significant article.
Yeah.
But no, I wanted you to talk about that because I feel that was a really ballsy episode that you had to call this out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, in that episode, I think I also talk about Vice and like some other things. And, you know, I'm not trying to disparage or discredit those outlets. I've actually spoken with Vice quite a bit, but they haven't run any stories based on our conversations. They ran other ones that had nothing to do with our conversations. And, you know, I just think that it's irresponsible.
Yeah.
What does it mean when you get black-pilled?
When you get black-pilled, you have come to be aware of the harsh truths about reality that most people ignore. So that comes from the blue pill, red pill analogy from the Matrix about the blue pill is, you know, kind of blissful ignorance, just world theory. The red pill is these harsh truths.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
And the black pill, well, the black pill's very interesting. The administrator of the forum speaks very eloquently about what the black pill is. You know, he looks at it as a series of just of facts, of studies, as opposed to like beliefs or prescriptions for how to behave, where he sees like the blue pill and red pill as that. And it is based on studies, but the studies also, you know, are often out of context, I think, or they just don't allow for the full picture, you know.
Do you get any criticism for being so compassionate?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You get criticism for everything.
For everything. Yeah, pretty much everything. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you deal with the criticism for being compassionate? And again, I keep coming back to this media thing because most of the stuff out there on the media about these people is not compassionate. It's all about
you have to talk smack about this group or else you're one of them.
Yeah.
That kind of vibe.
Or you are a misogynist or you know.
Or you're alt-right.
Exactly. And I've been called all those
called
things.
You.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, except that I just know that it's so wrong to me, it really is just not sensible for anyone to think this way, that to think that being, you know, nasty about this group of people is going to help anything, or to think that if you are empathetic, that that's going to make them worse. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me, so I deal with it.
One of my favorite moments from listening to your show, and forgive me, I don't remember the fellow's name, but he was talking about how he had gone to Asia to use Tinder, and he kind of did his own survey based on his location wherever he lives, I think in America, and then when he was in Asia, he said that the positive swipes that he got suggesting meeting up were I forget the percentages, but they were way higher in Asia. And he said that he went there for the purposes of a relationship, and he said that he experienced love in a moment. He said it was I got hugged, and he was like, it was something I like had never experienced, never understood. And he's like, these people I chat with online, they don't understand it either. They don't understand what it feels like, and they should do that too.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting on a ton of levels. But do a lot of incels actually do that? Will they travel to lose their celibacy? I
think a lot of them don't, probably because they have prohibitive costs, or you know, like you know, a lot of them are very high inhibition. They're, you know, not. Which is another reason why it's kind of crazy to think that like so many of them are going to turn violent, because they're very inhibited people. They're not, you know, they don't take a lot of risks. They don't do a lot of things socially. So traveling alone and stuff seems like it could be difficult for people in that situation. You know, I think if that works for him, then that's great. You know, who are we to say otherwise?
Yeah. Well, I thought it was kind of heartwarming, to be honest.
Yeah,
that
extremely.
part.
And you know, I think that a lot of them also don't believe in that for a number of reasons, you know.
Yeah. Now, we mentioned you getting criticized for a lot of things, really, pretty much probably anything you say.
Yeah.
We'll get some criticism. And we even spoke. I can't remember if we spoke on the phone or if you texted me about wanting to quit after, I think it was episode 3. And I feel like I knew that it was, you know, you were gonna relax a bit about it. But, you know, from my perspective, if you want to quit, like, then to just quit, like, that's fine. Like, no one's making you do it.
Yeah.
But I knew that you weren't going to also. You know, I knew that you just wanted to vent, and that's kind of part of the process.
Yep.
Unfortunately. So how have you kind of journeyed your way through this process of and to be clear, of getting criticized from people you don't know from anything you say?
Well, so at first it was really crazy to open myself up to so much negativity constantly online, on Twitter, through email. You know, it's not something that most people do. It's very unpleasant, you know, understandably. And that's another reason that I feel even more strongly about it, though, is because this is something that, like, a lot of these guys are dealing with.
Yeah.
Whether it's from strangers because they're incels, or just people are nasty online. You know, they really are. And so I think it's important to try to be compassionate, you know, in spite of that. But yeah, it was really hard at first. I've gotten a lot more used to it.
Well, you did a couple of episodes about that specifically, right? About the rhetoric online.
I did one, yeah. About the rhetoric online just in general, and one specifically about the feedback I was getting.
Yeah, what's like rage fuel, rope fuel? What is this? And how did that conversation come up with the person you spoke with?
So
and I don't know if you wanted to mention his name here.
Okay, so that's Isla for Sergeant Incel, Sarge. And what rage fuel is the way that they categorize their posts on their site. Rage fuel is one of the tags they can have. So that's stuff that will make you more angry. Rope fuel will make you more depressed or make you want to rope. Yeah. And I think that one was also called And a Walt. All women are like that. And that conversation came as, well, I was getting a lot of flack for not pushing back on them, actually. So I decided to push back a little bit more for one episode and just play that. So I had him talk about, you know, his theories about, like, women all being gold diggers or something. But yeah.
Okay. And with the rage fuel part, that's where they talk about things that get them angry.
Yeah.
And is that where a lot of the, I guess, sort of violent tendencies start to come out?
Yeah. I mean,
let me phrase that better. If someone were to go on to these forums because they were looking for someone who is speaking out and they want to idolize them, is that where they would go?
Yes.
Even that was a shitty way to phrase the question.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a complicated question. I don't think so, because I think that it might be like a starting point or something like that. But I think that even on their sites, the material that, first of all, if anything hints at violence, really, they will take it off and the users will be banned. But I really don't think that it's that material even. I do think that those grievances can be a starting point to make somebody angry. But I think it's more the, like, identities, the manifestos of these killers who do it themselves that really inspire violent behavior.
Before we sat down to talk, we were having a conversation, and you had said that, well, the conversation was about how this isn't really that, it's not covered in the way another terrorist organization or something of that nature is covered. What do you make of that? Does it feel like because it's this, like, fear of the unknown, because they don't really, like, people really don't know what it is and makes them uncomfortable to talk about? Or is it just that it's not sexy coverage? Okay,
that's a good question. So I think that to a degree, they are right not to cover it nearly as much. This movement in my opinion, doesn't even radicalize, in my opinion, again, and it doesn't lead to much violence or anything like that. And these are people that, you know, interact alone with each other about this and don't really tend to carry it outside of this group. I think, if anything, the danger is to themselves and their own personal growth and happiness, you know, in life. But so to an extent, yeah, it should get covered less if we're going to cover it with that narrative of this is a violent extremist group that's going to lead to mass shootings. You know, the problem is that, you know, you can cover it without making that assumption or that connection. And it's important to do that, you know, I think, or to study it that way. And it's not a sexy story, though, then, if the violent element is out of it.
Right. So you're running the line of, if I cover it in a certain way, it feeds into whatever movement or whatever potential violence might be there from somebody who's angry, because you're almost like sensationalizing it.
Well, that's a very real thing. I mean, like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, these groups were very much informed by the way the Muslim community was covered in the media. That's a definite, you know, and now that's happening with the far right groups in this country, because they're so demonized. People in that part, well, whatever, because those groups are so demonized, I think that really feeds into that's what these groups use as propaganda. You know, they say, look at this news article from CNN, from New York Times, from whatever, and look at the way that it talks about us. You know, look how foolish they are, or look how wrong they are, look how little they know, and look how much they hate us, and they want to kill us. And that kind of speech and rhetoric certainly informs any, you know, political protest movement.
I just wanted to turn to the YouTube comments real quick from the last interview that we did on Crawlspace back in August. Someone named Mr. Lee writes,
I haven't even looked at these. Okay.
Writes, mass shootings are staged, set up events to steal guns, nothing more.
Okay.
Initial reaction on that?
Oh, yeah.
Next.
How do you explain all the crisis actors?
Right.
Haven't you seen them in every one of the news broadcasts?
Right.
And Real Circa 247 says, she is sugarcoating the incel issue. Those guys are way too deep into their own self-pity to fix themselves, so they take it out on their dream girls. LOL. All men deal with reaction from women, even the so-called chads. Incels blame women for the fact that they don't have what it takes to win with any woman. Just my humble opinion.
Okay, so that's a common sort of criticism, I would say, and there's truth to it, that I'd say there is a lot of wallowing or indulgence in this group and self-pity. To some extent, there's a desire to blame and to, I guess, not want to, you know, they don't deal particularly well with rejection, but I don't know that means that I'm I mean, like, so what, though?
What was the name of the person that did that?
Real Circa 247.
Doesn't tell anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you can say that about any group. You can say that about any group with any movement,
right?
From Democrats to Republicans to incels to white supremacists.
Yep.
Well, she doesn't say what the issue is.
No.
She says the incel issue.
Yeah.
Right.
She doesn't
right.
actually say what she means.
You can put that stamp on any group and say your agenda. You need to stop crying about your agenda.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
and also she says,
don't listen.
Right. She says take it out I guess what she's saying the issue is, if there's anything there, is that they take it out on their dream girl. Like, when do they do that? How often does that happen? What do you mean by that?
Good question.
They often don't even interact with girls at all.
Yeah. But this person has this preconceived notion that an incel was dating their dream girl and she broke up with him.
Right.
And now he's an adolescent, you know, sniveling little boy
Yeah.
who plays too many video games and then goes and shoots up a mall.
Yep.
Because he sees his ex-girlfriend in every person there.
Right.
Now, the movie Joker came out in early October, and you spent some time talking about it on your show. I know you talked to our friends Shiloh and Scott about it of LA Not So Confidential. what a fascinating movie.
Piece of
And-
garbage.
and now I saw some headlines like, oh, this is the incel anthem, you know.
Yeah.
So how real is that?
Not real. No.
So incels don't look at the Joaquin Phoenix Joker character and say that's who I want to be, or the way he inspired violence in that movie is the way I want to do it.
No. I mean, a lot of them said, you know, when those warnings came out, like, why would we go and shoot up a movie that was sympathetic to us, you know?
Yeah,
And that's a
there you
good point, I think. Yeah, I don't think there was any. I thought that was wild.
So
Yeah.
it's a little sort of an honor, I guess, to even be put in that category, because it is. I was kidding. It is a great movie, and like I said, like, why, if this is the anthem for it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
I mean, then
yeah.
let it be the anthem for it. But why isn't Taxi Driver the anthem for it?
Right. There's lots of movies about
no
it. Yeah.
internet, and
Yep.
I mean,
that's-
now
yeah.
if the Joker in that movie went on the, I know it was set in the 80s, I think, but if he
Yeah.
went on the incel message board, that would be the only thing missing, maybe. You know, like for some, like the story of someone from that community who became violent, you know, and wanted to inspire other people, maybe. Obviously, the clown makeup and Batman storyline aside.
Right.
But no, I could see it. It did cross my mind when I was watching the movie. I
But
was
you'd
like,
probably seen some of those headlines before too. I mean, no, because you're
I had,
steeped
you're right.
in this now. Maybe it would have crossed your mind anyway. But
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, there's some things about that character.
Yeah.
Like he's mentally ill. I believe the very first scene of the movie, he's talking to his psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
He's on medication. He eventually goes off his medication.
Yep.
He becomes violent. So you could see why, and you know,
and he has like a girlfriend that
it's a delusion.
Yeah, it's a
actually.
delusion,
Yeah.
Oh, spoiler!
Spoilers.
No.
Sorry. But yeah, I mean, so there are a lot of those same check marks, you could say. So I could see why someone in the incel community would like that movie very much. I also like that movie very much. I have nothing to do with the incel community,
Right.
You know, so so there wasn't a lot of talk about that movie in your correspondence with them.
Well, there was, but only, again, how can you separate whether there would have been talk or not if there weren't these warnings and these associations? Like, I really don't think there would have been. I don't see them talking about other movies and saying, oh, I mean, sometimes they'll quite funnily also say, oh, this guy's a total incel about some character from something. It's usually quite funny. And I can see what they're talking about. Like, there's one that talks about Mad Men characters and one being an incel, like in comparison to Don Draper, that I thought was great. But, you know, I don't think that it would have been a big deal at all.
Yeah.
God damn it!
God damn it, Naama.
Good job.
Great
well
job.
done with
Thank
everything.
you.
What's
Yeah.
your favorite episode
Ooh, I don't know.
of Crawlspace?
Well, you guys, how many episodes do you have of Crawlspace
Oh, enough
now?
about us.
Hundreds.
Hundreds.
Gotta be.
Probably 100.
Yeah.
But what's your favorite incel episode?
I don't know.
This one?
Oh, this one. This one is a good one. If I could do a feed drop of it, that would be great too.
Go for it.
My favorite episode of Incel would probably be, I don't know. I liked the True Believer one a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's up there
Mhm.
as well.
Where is this going?
I don't know exactly. I mean, for me personally, I want to, and I have become involved with certain outreach groups and research about it outside of a podcast. But I'd like to explore that more on the podcast. And, you know, I don't know if it will have, you know, I don't know in terms of like how much I'll be able to reveal in like a first season or whatever it is, because that keeps changing for me too, because my understanding of it changes a lot with each week.
Yeah, and I think nor should you
Yeah.
say this is what my ultimate outcome should be.
Yeah.
Outside of the parameters that you've already set for yourself. But I really am impressed that you're taking it to community outreach programs and things like that. You know, it's a positive move to make.
Yeah, it's like the natural way to get deeper into it, and like the naturally like good way to get to make it meaningful for yourself too. You know.
Yeah.
And for the listeners.
Yeah.
And for the people who are involved in it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I know you guys got involved with a lot of like there's PI for the missing and just work on cold cases and
Yeah,
stuff.
that's kind of what I mean. You know, like you have this platform that you built. Why abandon it when you can use it and keep going? And, and do more with it. Do
yeah,
something
exactly.
bigger.
Yeah, right. I'm thinking of possibly venturing to like another group like this too, and besides continuing with
Interesting.
Oh, so
another like I'd call it a political protest movement. Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
Wow. Okay.
Maybe.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Crawlspacians.
Yes.
Yeah. The defenders of the worm.